Before we get into the video today, I just want to give a quick shout out to one of our sponsors, Gnostic TV. Gnostic TV is ancient wisdom reimagined. This is a Netflix for those who are spiritually curious and want a place to go where there is no censorship. I personally am doing a whole series on Gnostic TV called The Esoteric Explorer, where I am providing exclusive content to Gnostic. Gnostic TV is a host to all sorts of different content creators, many of whom are your old favorites. If you would like to check out Gnostic TV, there is a link down in the description box below. What would you do if you were forced to marry a man that you detested? A man that repulsed you? A man that you could not stand to be inside of? What if this man, however, was the key to your survival? And what if you lived in a time where divorce happened, but was never instigated by a woman? What would you do? Would you sit back quietly and slowly and painfully live out the days of your life? Or would you roll the dice? Today, the real life Game of Thrones continues. And today, there's a new queen in town. But before we go any further, you know what to do. Please hit that subscribe button and give us a like. As always, such a big, massive thank you to all of our patrons and our producers here on Esoteric Atlanta. Without you guys, this channel would not be possible. If you would like to join our Patreon or our producer community, there is a link down in the description box below. Welcome to Esoteric Atlanta. My name is Bryce, and today we're going to be talking about the mighty and mysterious Catherine the Great, along with her horse. Now, before we get into this, if you know anything about Catherine the Great or any of the scandals surrounding Catherine the Great, you do know that viewer discretion is advised for this episode. Up to you, of course, but there might be some topics that we discuss today that might not be suitable for little ears. With that being said, many of the urban legends associated with Catherine the Great we are going to talk about at the end of this episode. That's going to be part of the finale. As I went to storyboard this episode, I really considered where to place these urban legends. And her life is so freaking scandalous without the legends that I feel like the legends will really only make sense and really only give us a thorough understanding, if they even are legends or if there's some truth behind them, after we've discussed her life. Now, with Catherine the Great, along with Peter the Great, along with a lot of these Romanovs that we are covering, I, again, am not a military history channel. I, frankly, am very bored by military history. I do know that Catherine, like her predecessors, did a lot when it came to military. However, again, I'm only going to be covering certain things as they have to do with the telling of her story. Now, the funny thing about Catherine is because she was a woman, a lot of her military conquests do come through men, lovers of hers. So we'll kind of touch on that a little bit. I'm not here to like slut shame Catherine the Great, but that is kind of how she made her moves militarily. But let's get into it. We have to start at the very, very beginning. Catherine the Great, or Catherine II, was actually born Princess Sophia of Anhalt-Zerbst on May 2nd, 1729. She was a Taurus. And I think it definitely takes a Taurus to do what Catherine is going to do later on in her life. Now, Catherine was born nobility, but she was not born to a powerful noble family. She was born in Stettin in the Kingdom of Prussia, which is now modern day Poland. Now, she was born in what was then the Holy Roman Empire. And again, where the breaking of her birth really does set Sophia, who will later become Catherine, off on this game of survival, this game of thrones, as you will, because even though she was born into nobility, her family didn't have a lot of money. They weren't like monarchy, right? They were descendants of monarchy. She herself was a princess, but again, this was all a big chess game. How her family was going to get power and money had to do with the placement of the then Princess Sophia, soon to be Catherine, and her siblings. The Holy Roman Empire consisted of more than 300 sovereign entities who basically had to play it out, war it out to see who would come on, be the person on top. I've said so many times in covering these families that if I had to live back in this time, I would much rather be a peasant than be a part of the nobility. This is legitimately a dog eat dog world. So from the very beginning of Catherine's life, she was in survival mode. Being part of the German ruling family of Anhalt, her father was Christian August. He was a high-ranking Prussian general and governor of the city of Stettin. Most of her power, most of her bargaining power, though within her family bloodline, did come from her mother's family. Her mother was Joanna Elizabeth of Holstein-Gottorp. Now, the Holstein-Gottorp family still does exist today. I keep wanting to say the Holstein-Gottorp group because in my mind, this family reminds me of like a law firm. But the Holstein-Gottorp family line was a very, very powerful family line. And part of this family line was a boy named Peter von Holstein-Gottorp. Peter von Holstein-Gottorp was Princess Sophia, aka Catherine the Great's second cousin. Now, Peter was 1 year older than his second cousin, Princess Sophie, aka the future Catherine the Great. Now, Peter was Princess Sophie, aka Catherine the Great's second cousin through this Holstein-Gottorp family line. However, Peter von Holstein-Gottorp was also the grandson of Peter the Great. At this time, Peter von Holstein-Gottorp's aunt, a woman named the Empress Elizabeth, was on the ruling throne of Russia, and she did not have any heirs. And so Empress Elizabeth had designated her nephew, Peter von Holstein-Gottorp, to be her heir to the Russian throne. So obviously, for Joanna Elizabeth of the Holstein-Gottorp family, I keep wanting to say group. Why don't we just call them a group, okay, you guys, to make it easier for me? The Holstein-Gottorp group, Joanna Elizabeth, Princess Sophie, aka Catherine the Great's mother, realized that a marriage between Peter von Holstein-Gottorp and Princess Sophie or Catherine the Great would be very advantageous to Joanna and her family. Now, it is said that Catherine, aka Princess Sophie, at this time had a younger brother. And of course, boys do fare well when it comes to gaining riches for the family. But Joanna was very impatient. And Princess Sophie, aka Catherine's little brother was really young. And so she started to try to work her magic by maneuvering her daughter's marriage to Peter. Now, it is said that Joanna, Princess Sophie, aka Catherine's mother, was very, very controlling and very, very abusive. It does read to me when I read about her mother that she probably was a bit of what we call a stage mom, a helicopter parent. And it seems that her daughter's happiness was no concern of hers. She just wanted to get her daughter married to the most powerful bidder. And she had, again, an in with Peter von Holstein-Gotthard through the Holstein-Gotthard group, even though Peter's power came from Peter the Great, the Tsar of Russia, through his aunt, Empress Elizabeth. Now, Peter the Great, who we covered last week, passed away in 1725. And in the next 16 years, Russia is going to see 4 czars. Do y'all remember back when we did our first part on Peter the Great, where we talked about his sister, Sophia, who was the regent for Ivan and Peter before Ivan passed away? If you missed those videos, I will place them down below. So we have this little situation that's been brewing in the Romanov family, and it's been brewing since Tsar Alexei. Tsar Alexei was Peter's father. The son, Alexei, was the son of Michael Romanov, who was the first Romanov ruler. Peter was his grandson. But we have this issue with Alexei. Alexei was originally married to his first wife, the first Tsarina, that gave him like a shit ton of kids. She ended up passing away after the birth of Ivan. Then Alexei got remarried to his second wife, Natalia, who gave birth to Peter and some kids after Peter. So Peter himself, Peter the Great, was never supposed to be Tsar, but as life takes it sometimes, expect the unexpected, a lot of Alexei's original sons died. And when Alexei passed away, he only had 2 sons left from his first marriage, and then Peter, making Peter third in line from the throne. Fedora, the son that took the throne after Alexei was very sickly, he passed away, but Ivan, the youngest son of his first marriage, was mentally incompetent. And so the Boyars decided to make Peter and Ivan co-czars, with their sister Sophia acting as regent. That was a whole soap opera in of itself. Talk about a bloody, violent Game of Thrones. You can watch those videos if you'd like. Again, they're in the description box below. But nonetheless, all that being said, we now have 2 Romanov lines. We have the Romanovs from Alexei's first wife, and we have the Romanovs from Alexei's second wife. First wife is Ivan's line. Second wife is Peter the Great's line. Now, when Peter and Ivan were co-czars before Ivan passed away, it was stated that whoever had the first son would take the family throne. That ended up being Peter, with his son Alexei, who ended up being murdered by Peter later on. Again, that video's in the description box below. But we also have these daughters over here from Ivan. And even though at this point we want the sons to inherit, not we as in us, you and me, but we as in Russia at that time want the sons to claim the throne over the daughters, daughters can do something to guarantee the throne, and that is have a son. So during this time, Ivan's daughters are starting to have sons. This is going to become a problem in the next coming decades leading up to even Catherine's rule, because if a son's available, the son is always going to outweigh a daughter or a half daughter or a cousin, and they're both coming from Alexei, who is a Romanov. I hope that makes sense. This is freaking family drama, you guys. Like, oh my God, like I said, this is Game of Thrones. So let's go back to Peter the Great. Peter the Great passes away in 1725. And as you guys know, well, like I just said, like we talked about last week, Peter the Great did have his son basically assassinated. So his heirdom does then flip to Alexei's son, who was also named Peter. However, Peter the Great decides that he's going to make his wife, his second wife, Catherine, become the empress when he dies. So Catherine the First is the first empress of Russia. Now, Catherine the First is not ready to be any type of political ruler because Catherine the First can't even read or write. So she basically spends 2 years just being a socialite, basically partying, spending money, taking on lovers. She passes away in 1727, only 2 years again after her husband Peter. So at this point, the rightful heir to the throne is Peter's grandson through his dead son, Alexei. And this is Peter II. So Peter II then takes the throne. Again, Peter II's dad was killed by his own grandfather. So heavens only knows what kind of trauma, what kind of therapy that kid needed. But nonetheless, he didn't make it very long. He dies at the age of 14. Then we have Empress Anna. Empress Anna is one of Ivan's daughters. So Ivan, the guy who was mentally incompetent, therefore had to share the throne with his half-brother Peter. So Anna has a different Romanov lineage than the kid before her, Peter, right? We got these cousins fighting now. Like, they have the same lineage through Alexei, but they have different mothers. By the by, we're not going to get too into Anna because we got a lot to talk about in this video. She is considered one of Russia's most horrific czars. Seems that she was quite a little Miss Piggy, very gluttonous, just very gross. But nonetheless, she dies in 1740, and she hands the throne over to Ivan VI. Now, Ivan VI is the last of Ivan V's, the co-czar with Peter's great-grandchildren. He is considered to be the infant emperor because he was a freaking baby when he was put on the throne. However, in 1741, Elizabeth, one of Peter's daughter, deposes him. Ivan, his mother, and siblings would remain in captivity for most of their lives. Is this making sense to you guys? Please let me know if you need me to clarify this in the comment section below, and I will. So basically, these two are like cousins, but they come from two different maternal lines. This all goes back to Alexei, Peter's father and Ivan's father. Peter and Ivan were half siblings from two different women. So we've got the descendants of these two women, with Alexei being the common denominator, now battling out for the throne, basically. And Elizabeth, again, one of Peter's daughters, is basically like, no, we're going to take Ivan's mother's bloodline off the throne and make sure Natalia's Romanov bloodline is on the throne by basically deposing this baby, this infant. They keep him in capacity. They do like basically educate him. We're going to come back. There's a reason why I'm telling you guys this whole backstory, because this is going to become important when Catherine herself takes over the throne, this kid Ivan, because he is a literal Romanov. And if we're looking at bloodlines, he's a fucking Romanov. So he's placed into captivity. He's put in solitary confinement for most of his life. He is given a basic education to learn the Bible, but nonetheless, as this story goes on, as we get back to Princess Sophie, aka Catherine, and Peter von Holstein Gottorp, of the Gottorp group, we've got Ivan VI sitting in captivity while Empress Elizabeth is on the throne. Now, Empress Elizabeth does not have any children, and supposedly, we're going to talk, there might be a child, we're going to talk about that later on in this story, but for right now in this story, how we now get to Peter von Holstein Gottorp is through Empress Elizabeth, because she doesn't have a child. And so Peter, little kid Peter over in Prussia, aka the German kid, is her pick. So he is her nephew. He is the grandson of Peter the Great through Peter's mother's line, Natalia. So she picks him to be her heir. And she needs to pick a successor fast, because there is always in the background a coup that's silently forming to free Ivan VI, the infant emperor, and remove her from the throne. So she needs to really secure herself and her descendants on this line. And it's not necessarily, again, her descendants, but the descendants from Natalia, Alexei's second wife, Peter's mother and father. That would then be her grandfather and grandmother, Peter von Holstein-Gottorp of the Holstein-Gottorp group. That would be Alexei, and Natalia would be his great-grandparents, all right, because this is his aunt. Okay, I hope that makes sense again, you guys. Like, talk about some really screwed up family lines, but again, let me know if you need more clarification. It's just very intense. But nonetheless, here we are. We have Empress Elizabeth on the throne. We have her nephew Peter of the von Holstein-Gottorp group over in Prussia, who is going to become the Tsar of Russia. He is now being put on the market for a wife. She needs to find him. Empress Elizabeth needs to find him a good wife of good noble blood, because if they can produce a baby soon, then she's really secure on the throne. If she not only has an heir, but she also has an heir to the heir. And here comes Joanna Elizabeth von Holstein-Gottorp of the von Holstein-Gottorp group to try to arrange a marriage from the other side of the family with Peter, who is her child, Princess Sophie, aka Catherine the Great's second cousin. Okay, so Princess Sophie, we'll just call her Princess Sophie for now, because the name Catherine is going to be important when she flips, and we're going to talk about that then. So that's who I'm referring to, guys. When I say Princess Sophie, I'm referring to Catherine the Great, but we're just going to say Princess Sophie from now. She meets her second cousin Peter when she's like 10 and he's 11, and she's frankly quite disgusted by him. Now, this could have been her age. I don't know many 10-year-olds who are like googly-eyed over a little boy because he's 11. You know, he's a kid. The idea at that age of being with a man is, ooh, gross. So she immediately is very much put off by him. At 10, she even complained that he played too much with his toy soldiers. These toy soldiers are going to play into his story later on in the timeline as well. But at 11 years old, okay, most 11-year-olds like their G.I. Joes and their toy soldiers, so whatever. Well, with this arrangement of them to be married, Peter at this point, he's like the most eligible bachelor in all of Europe because of his eventual ascension to the throne through Empress Elizabeth. So Princess Sophie's mother has to play this right. So she wheels and deals her political connections with Frederick the Great of Prussia to really secure a place for Princess Sophie in the Russian court by marrying or being arranged to marry Peter. Now, I don't really know what my opinion is of Catherine the Great. I have some mixed feelings about her, but one thing I won't take away from her is her intelligence. And we're going to talk about how she plays this game, kind of like I alluded in the beginning of this episode. How does Princess Sophie at this point, later to become Catherine, play this game of chess? She has no choice but to really do what her parents tell her to do. She has no survival skills outside of the gentry class. She has to play this Game of Thrones in order to keep herself alive and to help keep her family alive. On top of that, it does not appear that Princess Sophie had a very supportive mother. Again, Joanna was known to be a narcissist. She was known to be cruel and vindictive. She was known to use gossip, court gossip, to her favor. And for Princess Sophie at this point, even though she detests her second cousin Peter, I do think that she, in her intelligent ways, starts to, even if it's subconscious at this time, starts to plot her own escape from her mother through her soon-to-be husband, Peter, but just kind of using him as a stepping stone to secure her place within the Russian court. In 1742, Peter von Holstein-Gottorp of the von Holstein-Gottorp group is moved from what is now Finland to Russia. He is 14 years old at this time. He's moved at this time so he can start to apprentice under his aunt to start to learn the politics of Russia. Now, at this point, both Peter and his second cousin, Princess Sophie, soon to become Catherine, don't speak Russian. They're very German, quote unquote German, even though it's Prussia at this time. They're very German, Germanic in their culture and their language, even though both of them are educated because they're nobles. I mean, Catherine did speak multiple languages outside of Russian at this point. She was educated as a noble woman. None of them are familiar with the Russian culture. They are not actually Russian. All right, so they get thrown. Peter comes first at 14 to start to learn the politics of Russia under his aunt because he is her heir. So this shows the Russian people, more importantly the nobility, that she is definitely the good line for the throne. Stop paying attention to this Ivan kid in prison because look, here's my heir. He's now here in Russia. He's here to learn and to study so that when the day comes that I pass away, you have a really good, solid leader in your court. Look, here he is. Here he is. Peter von Holstein-Gotthard of the von Holstein-Gotthard group, who's also the grandson of Peter the great-grandson of Alexei, and the great-great-grandson of Michael Romanov, the original Romanov. So look, Russia, here he is. He's here in court. Don't worry. Empress Elizabeth's got this. We're going to make sure he can take over for your children and your children's children to be safe under our leadership. Now, 2 years later, Princess Sophie also moves to Russia with her mother for the same purpose, to start learning the culture of Russia so that she can one day be the Tsarina. Now, their agreement to get married is kind of like written in pencil right now. Like it's probably going to happen, but we still are not totally secure in Princess Sophie being Peter von Holstein-Gotthard of the von Holstein-Gotthard group's wife. Now, even though Princess Sophie is only 15 years old at this time, again, this is where I think we see her intelligence and her need to survive, because this chick plays her cards right. She rolls the dice in a very, very smart way, and she starts to embrace Russian culture. She stays up late into the night learning the Russian language. She starts to study the Orthodox Russian faith, where she herself has been raised a Lutheran. She really starts to play her part right. Empress Elizabeth is so impressed by her. She just thinks this woman is like the best thing since sliced bread, and she's liking this girl more and more and more, and really wanting her to be her nephew, Peter von Holstein-Gotthard of the von Holstein-Gotthard group. She wants her to be his wife. She's showing really good promise for a very good Tsarina. And on top of that, she openly converts to the Russian Orthodox faith on the 28th of June, 1744. This is when Princess Sophie is no longer Princess Sophie, and she's Ekaterina of Russia. Ekaterina in English is Catherine. Now, she picks the name Catherine, clever girl, after Empress Elizabeth's mother, Peter von Holstein-Gotthard of the von Holstein-Gotthard group's grandmother, the Empress Catherine I, who was Peter the Great's second wife, first Empress of Russia, the socialite who partied. Y'all, she picks this name on purpose. She's showing loyalty not only to Russia, not only to Empress Elizabeth, but loyalty to the line of Peter, of Natalia, his mother, making it very clear she stands with this line and not Ivan's line. Do you see how clever this girl is? I mean, think about it this way, you guys. When you were a 15-year-old girl, if someone came to you and said you get to change your name as a 15-year-old girl, you probably would never have changed it in a political move like this. I mean, I shudder to think what I would have picked at 15, but I guarantee you at 15 years old, I would not have been looking at strategically naming myself in order to strategically place myself where I needed to be placed in order to secure my own safety and my own family's safety. This is a huge, huge checkmate. And I don't even think Peter von Holstein-Goddard of the von Holstein-Goddard group realizes it, that she just checkmated his ass. Not only did she checkmate his ass with her name, Ekaterina or Catherine, but my friends, remember how I said she would stay up late at night studying Russian and learning, really, really trying to learn Russian and embrace Russian culture? And she, a German-born princess, has now declared herself to be a Russian nationalist. Y'all want to know something? Her husband, her soon-to-be husband, her second cousin, has done none of this. So the young Peter von Holstein-Goddard of the von Holstein-Goddard group, the teenage boy at this time, has refused to learn Russian. He is not adapted to the cultures, and he has heard many times, as teenagers do, saying that he believes Russia is a backwaters, hillbilly, redneck place, and he is so much better because he's from Western Europe. He's this Germanic prince. These Russian peasants are beneath him. Meanwhile, his soon-to-be wife has identified herself as one of these Russian people. On the 21st of August, 1745, Peter and Catherine are married in St. Petersburg. And over again, he is seen as the person who is insulting the Russian people. He also insults her. She thinks, even though she's also Germanic like he is, he calls her a backwater child bride. I don't know why I find that so funny. I think I'm going to have to use that insult at some point in my life. I have to find the perfect person to insult by calling them a backwater child bride. I find that hysterical. But nonetheless, he's insulting Catherine. He's insulting his people, his soon-to-be people. Empress Elizabeth is still alive at this point. And so the people subsequently are finding a common bond with his wife, Catherine. Even though she was born Germanic, I'm sorry, I'm still laughing about this. I can't stop laughing about the backwater child pride. It's still cracking me up. But anyway, even though she herself is also Germanic in lineage, she has basically done everything to prove herself to be loyal to the Russian people. So she's being insulted by Peter. They're being insulted by Peter. So the people are definitely starting to like her a whole lot more than they are liking Peter. And again, this is a great checkmate for her, because at this point in the story, Empress Elizabeth is still alive. Like, for all intents and purposes, they have no idea when Peter von Holstein-Goddard of the von Holstein-Goddard group is going to become czar, because Empress Elizabeth is still thriving at this point. So this is a slow moving a snowball, right? Where it's just slowly starting to build up, where people like are rolling their eyes at Peter, this spoiled brat young boy, and starting to like Catherine more because the spoiled brat young boy is insulting her just like he's insulting the people, the boyars, the nobility, the people of Russia that really he needs in his corner. Now, a lot of what Peter is known for is his immaturity. I mean, that you read that in multiple cases, that this was just a very immature kid. In fact, when Empress Elizabeth was planning the wedding between Catherine and Peter, his doctors told Elizabeth that even at 17 years old, Peter had not gone through puberty. And so the likelihood of him being ready for marriage and the things that marriage entails was low, and that he probably would not be able to produce an heir for a while because of his immaturity. It is also believed at this time in our own timeline that Peter suffered from a condition called phimosis, I think is how you say it. It's a medical condition that basically means that he had a tight foreskin. Listen, I don't have a schlong, so I don't really know what that would entail. People say what you want about circumcision. Again, I'm not a man, nor am I a mother of a son, so that's not any of my business whether someone is circumcised or not. But if you have a tight foreskin, you probably should be circumcised, because basically what happens is it makes erections painful. And so you can't have a baby without that. Now, it is believed that Louis XVI of France with Marie Antoinette also had this problem, and this is why it took a long time for intimacy, and it took a long time for children to be produced. And I feel really bad for these kids if that's what was happening. And thank God, I mean, I know I have a lot of issues with modern medicine, but thank God in today's age that we do have modern medicine, because that can be fixed real quick if your son has this issue. Like, I don't think any parent would ever want their son to have that issue. So just snip, snip, we're all good. It's done. But back then, this was a problem. And so I just wanted to put that out there, that that is believed by a lot of historians. He did suffer from that, although they wouldn't have called it that at the time. Nonetheless, Empress Elizabeth is so desperate to make sure that she is secured on the throne that she does allow Peter and Catherine, or ordain Peter and Catherine, to get married sooner than his physicians believed he was ready to get married. I think back then, too, it was mostly a focus on his physical readiness, like puberty, but we also look at emotional and maturity as well. To be married, you have to be very emotionally mature to handle that type of a commitment and that type of a relationship, especially if you are in high political power. And if the physical body is not naturally at the state of being ready for that, then the emotional and mental body are not either. And so you're basically forcing a child to get married and perform as a husband when this child is still more interested in playing with his toy soldiers, aka the GI Joes of that day. This was very apparent the night of their wedding. At this point, there was culturally what they called a bedding ceremony, where the nobles would come to the bedroom of the bride and the bridegroom and watch them consummate the marriage. Talk about how horrifying that is. Like, oh my God. But nonetheless, Catherine goes to the bedroom. She gets tucked in, and she waits, and she waits, and she waits, and she waits for her husband. Eventually, Peter von Holstein-Gottorp of the von Holstein-Gottorp group comes into the bedroom hours late and drunk, where he subsequently just passes out. I actually don't, I mean, I kind of feel sorry for him in this regard, because if he's not ready to be a husband in all definitions of the word, and he's being forced to do this, and he's also got this condition with a tight foreskin, don't blame this kid for getting drunk. Don't blame him for kind of skipping out and getting drunk and passing out so he can't consummate his wedding. Now, over time, this becomes so much of a problem, and Empress Elizabeth is desperate for Catherine to get knocked up so that she can have an heir to the heir, right? This is to secure her, to secure this particular Romanov line, that she goes to Catherine and basically gets Catherine an intimacy coach, like a sex therapist. This is a woman at court that has a lot of kids. So Empress Elizabeth's like, she knows what to do. She's always pregnant. So she sends this woman to Catherine to help Catherine, because obviously this is Catherine's fault, right? Obviously this is not Peter's fault. It's Catherine's fault, right? So she sends this woman to Catherine, and she basically has this woman coach Catherine in how to be intimate with Peter. She, of course, tells Catherine she needs to be praying more. Of course she does. Of course, that's all that takes, right? It's just more prayer. But then it gets so bad that this coach ends up locking Catherine and Peter, locking them in the bedroom together. And most nights, Peter just stays up all night playing with his toy soldiers, not interested in Catherine, or not really interested in what he's supposed to do with Catherine at all. At this point, things are so desperate that the coach, the therapist, tells Catherine that because it's such a dire circumstance and they need to get an heir quickly, that Catherine probably needs to take a lover. She's like, oh no, honey, don't worry. It's not a sin to have adultery, to have an affair. We really need to get you pregnant. For your safety, for Empress Elizabeth's safety, we need you knocked up. And so here you go. Here's a lover for you to boink so we can get you knocked up. And this, my friends, is where all the legends of Catherine's lovers begin, with a man named Sergei Saltykov, who ends up being Catherine's first ever lover. But before we move on with this story, just a brief commercial from one of our sponsors who make this free and available to all of you. So we love our sponsors here on this channel. Hang tight. Once we get through the sponsor commercial, we'll be back with the rest of the story. My Uncle Dan used to talk about QTR. QTR meant for him quality time remaining. My Uncle Dan was a very active cyclist and a very avid hiker. And after he retired after a long career, he decided that he really wanted to make the most of the years he had left where there was quality to his life before the aging process really limited his ability to enjoy things like cycling and hiking. Unfortunately, my Uncle Dan did lose his battle to cancer back in 2019. But when I was first introduced to the Asea product, all I kept thinking about was my Uncle Dan and his concoction post-retirement of quality time remaining. As human beings, we've been taught that as our body starts to age, we eventually have to start giving up some of the activities that we enjoyed. For my uncle, that was cycling and hiking. With the Asea supplement, what this product does is it restores signaling back into the body. Signaling, or communication between the cells of the body, is what actually allows the aging process to happen. Your body is designed by nature, by God, whatever you want to call that higher consciousness, it's designed to heal itself. That's why the cells communicate. That's why you have an immune system. But unfortunately, as we become conditioned to the toxins of this world, that immune system and that signaling system start to wear down. When our body loses signaling, that's what causes wrinkles. That's what causes cellulite. That's what causes the hair to gray. And for men, that's potentially what causes hair loss. As Dr. Silverman has used as an example, when we are a child and we fall off of our bicycle and skin our knees, our recovery time is pretty quick. This is because we have an abundance of redox or signaling in our bodies. But after puberty and into our adulthood, we rapidly start to lose this signaling. So if we were to fall off a bike at 80, that could mean life or death. Now for me, since I've been on the Asea now for about 3 months, I have noticed a tremendous amount of energy and endurance restored back to my life. As you guys all know, I am an avid exerciser. I truly believe in the power of a good sweat. And since starting the Asea, I have noticed that my recovery time between workouts and my endurance within workouts has enhanced immensely. I'm able to go longer and harder. I've also noticed, as many of you guys have commented in the comment section, I feel like I'm getting younger, or at least looking younger. No, my age keeps going up, but I look back and compare my videos now to the videos I did when I first started YouTube, and I feel like I look younger now than I did then. And I do have to say that is most likely because of the Asea. When I talked to my mother about this product, I mentioned the quality time remaining that my Uncle Dan used to speak of, and how with the Asea, for her as a grandmother, this product can give her the potential to have a lot longer quality time of playing in the backyard with her grandchildren. In fact, so many amazing, incredible stories can be found in comment sections of this video and on Asea's own YouTube channel, which I will place down in the description box below. Now, we can't make any medical claims with this product as it is just a supplement. But from my perspective and from all of the perspectives and experiences I've read from you guys, this product has done nothing but enhance every single person's life, every single person's quality time remaining, whether that be 50 years or 10 years. We see a lot of people talk about med beds, this idea of med beds. Everybody's waiting for a med bed. But what if I told you, in my opinion, the med bed is already here? With the Asea, what it comes with, each liquid, it's a liquid, each liquid comes with its own shot glass. The shot glass is about 2 ounces. Each person is instructed to take between 4 and 8 ounces a day. You take a little shot of the Asea, you swish it around for 30 to 60 seconds so that you allow the saliva to carry the redox where it wants to carry it, and then you swallow the rest. The redox is so genius, and the creators of this product are so genius that, in my opinion, they really honored and respected God's design. Because you see, when you take the liquid redox, you are allowing your body its own intelligence, because the redox is just a tool. It's just the signaling for your cells. Your body is designed to heal itself, and this is what helps the body to continue to heal itself. And so when you take the liquid, your body knows exactly where it needs to send the redox, what part of your body is wounded, what part of your body isn't so stable. And so it sends the redox to that particular area so the cells in that area can start to communicate to get that particular area of the body back to where it needs to be. Now, of course, with this redox gel, you are able to direct the gel wherever you want it to go. So today I woke up and had a little bit of a creak in my neck. So I took the redox gel and I rubbed it on the back of my neck 3 times within 5 minutes. I personally, in my experience, automatically started to feel relief. You can also use this as a beauty supplement too. I've been using the gel on my thighs and on my boobs, because yes, friends, I am 40 years old, and as the aging process does occur, the body starts to droop a little bit. And no, I've never had children, so my boobs aren't as droopy as they could be if I had used them to feed a child, but they still are. You know, I got boobs, and they're starting to sink a little bit. I also have stretch marks on my boobs that I've had my whole life because, you know, they grew at some point when I was a child. So I've been taking the gel and putting them on my chest. And not only have I noticed a difference, but my boyfriend has also noticed a difference as well. My boyfriend has been putting the gel on his head. As he is in his 50s now, he has started to notice thinning of the hair, as most men do around that age in their lives. And he is starting to grow his hair back, which is quite incredible. In fact, I find myself now when I walk past him putting my hand in his hair just to feel all the hair that's growing back on his head. You see, my friends, your body doesn't want to fail you. It wants to keep you going. It wants to keep you healthy. That is how God designed it. And this product is basically the controllers of this world's worst nightmare. Now, once again, I can't make any medical claims because this product is just a supplement. But from everything I have researched about this product, from all of the people using this product, you really can't go wrong with this product. And because this product uses the intelligence of your body, each individual person is going to start to notice different things occurring with this product. If you are interested in learning more about this product or purchasing this product or even becoming a part of the business of Asea, please text BRICEINFO to 321-216 8047. Again, that's BRICEINFO to 321-216-8047. And Jay or Hillis will get back to you as soon as possible. If you are texting from a country outside of the United States, please make sure that you add +1. 321-216-8047 +1 is our country code. And in your text, on top of texting BRICEINFO, just make sure you let Jay or Hillis know that you are texting from a country outside the United States so they can arrange a call with you on WhatsApp or Signal or Zoom, any application that's not going to charge you. With that being said, another amazing thing about the Asea company is that they do offer a 30-day money-back guarantee. So if this product doesn't work for you or isn't what you expected after the first 30 days, they will refund you. All right, back to our show. On October 1 of 1754, a baby was born. This was a baby named Paul. And Paul was the answer to everyone's prayers. Just like Peter the Great's son Alexei had been the answer to his prayers, the birth of this new male heir was something that Empress Elizabeth had been waiting for a very long time to really secure her place in her family's line on the throne. Again, not only did she have an heir, but now she had an heir to the heir, by way of Catherine. Now, from the get-go, there was speculation that Peter was not actually Paul's father because it was an open secret that Catherine had taken on a lover. Again, a lover who was given to her by this sex coach that her aunt-in-law, Empress Elizabeth, had sent to her in order to get her pregnant. Now, if it's true, if Paul was not the biological heir to Peter's bloodline, then this means that the Romanov line would have ended with Peter von Holstein-Gotthard of the von Holstein-Gotthard group. And many people still do believe that perhaps Paul was the child of Catherine's lover, Sergei. However, I do believe that Paul was Peter's son. It had been 9 years since the couple had been married by the time of his birth, so it's plenty of time for a 17-year-old kid to grow into a functioning 26-year-old man. Now, we will get into Paul next week because Paul is truly a fascinating person, one that I'm very, very intrigued by. But for now, Paul's place in the story is that he basically saved Empress Elizabeth. Now, again, Catherine detests her husband, Peter. She's repulsed by him. She doesn't even find him remotely attractive. Well, Peter still kind of feels the same way about Catherine. The feeling is totally mutual. In fact, they had 2 apartments at the total opposite ends of the palace. That's how much they could not stand each other. And Peter was not only gaining the reputation of not being a Russian nationalist, but more in support of Germany, he was also a very bad behaved young man. He was hated by the court and by his people. He would drill his soldiers until the early morning hours. He was a drunkard and very abusive to everyone. After many years of living in Russia, he still refused to learn Russian. He would also do very abusive things to Catherine, like come into her apartment in the middle of the night, being loud and playing loud music with his little quartet band just to keep her up, just to try to sabotage her sleep. And so when Catherine was in the process of giving birth to their son, Paul, it's reasonable to know that Peter did not stick around to help her through this birth. In fact, Catherine was kind of left alone. After she pushed this child out, the Empress Elizabeth came and collected her great-nephew and took on her great-nephew as if he were her own son, leaving Catherine to recover by herself. I cannot imagine how emotionally painful that must have been for Catherine to not only go through something very physically painful like childbirth without any of our modern painkillers to help get through it, but then to have to recover by yourself and to have your baby taken from you, and you never see your child because your husband's aunt, who is the Empress, has now basically taken full ownership of him. At this point, it is said that Catherine's personality changed. She went from a woman who was playing the game smart by doing what she was told to secure her safety to being a fierce competitor for the Russian throne. We also know during this time of Catherine's recovery from childbirth, she became enthralled in philosophy and the French Enlightenment movement. She started to read a lot of Voltaire, and being a woman who was obviously very smart, a lot of these ideas and this new age of reason that was coming around really intrigued her and gave her something to think about while she was alone in her room recovering. Now, we're not really sure when Catherine's plot against Peter was formed. No one really knows for sure when she decided that she was going to try to take the throne from him. I have a feeling that there probably isn't an exact date where she decided she was going to take the throne from him. It probably was an idea that formed very, very slowly from her influence of philosophy and enlightenment, and also her anger for being treated like shit by the family that she had married into. After Catherine recovered from childbirth and she made her way back into the social life of the court, as I said, her personality had changed. No more was she the meek and demure young princess she had been when she married into the family. No longer was she sucking up to the Empress Elizabeth. Instead, Catherine herself was strategically making friends with people of high authority within the Russian court, mainly men in the military. Now, it is true that Catherine did have quite a few lovers, and many people do believe that she strategically picked these lovers to help her with her cause. And maybe that's true in the beginning, but towards the end of her life, I think it was actually the opposite. After she had obtained her power, I think lovers came to her to get power from her versus the other way around. But it wasn't just her strategic planning of lovers or friends within the nobility to get on her side against this horrific Peter. I mean, let's be frank, it wasn't hard to get on Catherine's side because everyone hated Peter. So it wasn't a huge task, a huge undertaking for her to do this. But not only was she just like picking men in the military to help her, but she was doing something even more clever. Peter did not treat the servants and the staff of the palace well at all. I mean, listen, he was mean to everyone. And so when Peter went low, Catherine went high. She started to even treat the staff very well, very respectful, very kind. Now, I'm not going to go through all of Catherine's their lovers. There's basically no need to do that. But there was one that you do need to know. This is a man named Gregory Olav. Now, this man and his brother are really going to come to Catherine's aid through a lot of her future battles with Peter and with the Russian people. But on Christmas Eve, 1761, everything changed for Peter and Catherine because Empress Elizabeth had a stroke. She ended up passing away on January 5th of 1762 at the age of 52 years old, just like her father, Peter the Great. Peter von Holstein-Gottorp of the von Holstein-Gottorp group now ascended to the throne as Tsar Peter III. And Catherine became the Empress consort. At this point, Peter and Catherine moved to St. Petersburg, which is now the capital of Russia. We also, again, I'm not going to get too much into military history, but something really important to note here is that you've also got this 7 years war going on basically between Prussia and Russia. And there's all these different countries that are involved in treaties and allies. And Peter had been very much in support of Prussia, Russia's enemy. This did not put him in a favorable light with the nobility or with the people of Russia. This could be considered treason. This could be like sending a bunch of money to another country instead of taking care of your own people. Looking at you, looking at you. So we have a lot of friction. Peter has always made it clear that he considered himself as a German-born man of Germanic lineage to be superior to the backwater people of Russia. He's never learned the language. And now in this great big war, this war of territory, he's basically siding with the country that is opposed to Russia. Now, I do want to point out that there were some good things that Peter did with the short time that he was the Tsar, because I think it is important to mention some of the good things he did, which he did proclaim religious freedom. He did abolish the secret police that were very violent towards people. Remember the secret police that were set up by Ivan the Terrible? I'll link that video down in the description box too for you guys. It was the original Anastasia Romanov video. So he abolishes the secret police. He also made it illegal for landowners to kill their serfs without going to court first, which we're going to talk more about with Catherine, because serfdom is a huge issue that we cannot get away from with Catherine the Great. But nonetheless, 5 months into Peter III's reign as Emperor or Tsar of Russia, he decides to take a little vacay. Bless his heart, he needs a vacation. You know, being the czariest of czar must be very, very hard work. And so he takes his courtiers, who are all also of German descent, and he goes to Orenbaum to visit his German relatives. And this is in July of 1762. Now, Catherine strategically decides to stay behind. However, on July 8th of 1762, Catherine is informed that one of her supporters has been apprehended by her husband, Peter. This means that Peter is aware, somewhat aware, that there is a coup that Catherine is planning against him. This means that Catherine has to act fast. She has to make a split decision. Basically, they're like, Catherine, if you're going to try to take this throne, it has to be now. And so Catherine, in the early morning hours, gets up and she goes to the Izhmalovsky Regent. Now, the Izhmalovsky Regent is a branch of the Russian military that was created by Empress Anna. Remember Empress Anna? The one that I said liked to eat a lot. She created this particular branch of the military to basically act as protection for the royal family, more specifically for the Tsar or the Emperor. Kind of like the secret security, like the president has today. And so Catherine makes a bold move, and this is a gamble on Catherine's part. Like she is really rolling the dice here. So she goes before this regent and regency of the military, and she begs them for protection against her husband Peter. Now, if Peter hadn't been such a douchebag to his own military, she might not have been so lucky. They could have executed her for basically committing treason against him, for asking to protect her against him when he is technically like the main person, the main czar. But she does get their allegiance to protect her. Then she turns around and goes to the Simovsky barracks. Now, I don't know if I'm saying that right. Again, I'm not Russian, so I apologize if I'm not saying that right. But in these barracks, there is a clergyman there waiting to anoint her as the sole ruler of Russia. Because Peter has abandoned his people, because Peter is supporting the enemy of his people, this clergyman basically says that because Catherine stayed behind with the Russian people, she is the sole occupant of the Russian throne. And now she is by law ordained as Empress Catherine II. She quickly had her husband arrested and forced him to sign an abdication document, making it fully legal that he gives his throne up to her. Now, make no mistake, my friends, the world at large is shooketh by this. The world is shocked by a woman doing this to her husband. It was Shakespeare who said a few hundred years before, hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. And this woman had been scorned for a very long time. And this woman happened to be a better chess player than her husband. She had been checkmating him all along. Now, it's also interesting to note, I find this interesting to note, that if we look astrologically at what was happening at this time with the placement of Mars and Pluto, which are like Mac Daddy warring planets, they're in this kind of the same placement that they are now. So we're seeing a lot of the same things happening then that are happening now. For example, revolution is in the air. Not only is this female overthrowing her husband and becoming the czariest of czars, but we've got the French Revolution, we have the Haitian Revolution, we have the American Revolution. There is so much going on. We have the Age of Enlightenment, the Age of Reason. There is so much happening at this time on our globe, just like there is now, that it's quite fascinating. It's quite fascinating to see how the cookie crumbles with this, because if this had happened in any other time in our history, I don't know if it would have worked out in her favor like it did. Now, on July 17th, 1762, Peter III is dead. He has been assassinated in prison. Now, we can't prove this, but remember how I told you one of Catherine's boyfriends was a man named Gregory Orlov? Well, his brother, Alexei, is the person that history claims killed Peter. Now, I think we pretty much know that he is the one who did it. But what we don't know for sure, if it was ordered by Catherine or if he took it upon himself to just go ahead and eliminate Peter. But nonetheless, Peter is now fully gone. So not only has he signed over his throne to Catherine, but he is like gone. He's gonzo. He's done. He's done. Now, Catherine is sitting on the throne. Now, we have some controversy here. She's going to have quite a few coups on her hand, like 12 in total throughout her whole life. And one of these controversies is that a lot of the nobility supported Catherine because they were under the impression that Catherine would act as regent for Paul, her son Paul, until her son Paul was of age. But I'm over here like, LOL. Why did y'all assume that? Did you not learn from your own history? Look what happened with Princess Sophia, Peter's regent, who literally went bombastic on him and Ivan when they came to claim their throne. Y'all haven't learned yet that if a woman's taking the throne, she ain't giving it up that easily? Like, LOL. That was never the plan. Now, a couple of years after Catherine becomes the Tsarina, the Empress, it does become clear that she plans on sticking around. Remember how I told you Empress Elizabeth usurped the infant emperor Ivan VI and put him into prison and said, you know, basically give him a very minor education. She also said if he ever tried to escape or if anybody ever tried to free him, kill him immediately. Well, the same rule was in place for Catherine because, my friends, Catherine was not a Romanov. She only married a Romanov. Now, her son, I believe, was a Romanov, which again, we'll get to Paul next week, but Catherine herself was not. So if she's not being regent for Paul, if she's ruling in her own right, then there's a problem for some people, because some people really like those bloodlines and they really want to keep a particular bloodline on the throne. So if she's not going to be acting as regent for Paul, her son, who is a Romanov, then we have another option. There's a Romanov sitting in prison right now, Ivan VI. And so in 1764, there is a plan to free Ivan. But because of the law that Empress Elizabeth stated that if anybody tried to free him, Ivan was to be killed immediately, he was killed immediately. It's a very sad life that Ivan lived. I have a lot of pain in my heart for this child. He was 23 years old when he was killed. And of course, everyone who planned to take part in this coup were also executed, beheaded by the behest of Catherine. We also have the story of Princess Terkanova. And this happened 13 years later. Princess Tarkanova was allegedly the daughter of Elizabeth. Now, some people call her an imposter. I don't know. It's a very interesting story, but nonetheless, she was gaining quite a lot of momentum around her claim to the throne because she herself was a Romanov if she was the daughter of Empress Elizabeth. Now, Princess Tarkanova, she was eventually arrested by the Orlov brothers, old Grigory and Alexei, who are probably the reason why Catherine was as powerful. I mean, let's be honest, those two Orlov brothers really did a lot for Catherine to secure her place in power. She was arrested and taken to a dungeon. She ended up dying in the dungeon of tuberculosis. She was very young herself, although there is kind of a cool conspiracy where people believe she actually escaped the dungeon and lived the rest of her life at a monastery, passing away in 1810. I don't know how I feel about that. I don't know if it really even matters how I feel about that. Catherine had her coronation on the 22nd of September, 1762, and her coronation marked an historical event for Russia. This is when the Romanov crown, the imperial crown, the famous Romanov crown, was designed specifically for Catherine. The crown is now on display at a museum over in Russia. Reminds me a lot of the crown jewels of England, where you go to the Tower of London and actually see the crown jewels yourself if you want to. So yeah, that's just something interesting, a little trivia to know that it was the famous Romanov crown came from Catherine. During the course of her reign, she did expand Russia's land by 200,000 square miles. And we're going to touch a little bit on some things that Catherine, interesting things that Catherine had to do during her reign as the czarist of czarist people. And one thing that's also interesting is that there was a lot of infighting against the territory of the Ukraine and the Crimea, which I find very fascinating that we're still dealing with that today. But nonetheless, that's all we're going to talk about that because, YouTube. But I just thought that was interesting. You can look more into that if you want to, but there were constantly battles going on for this land. Not much has changed. Anyway, let's move on. Because of Catherine's expansion of land, she was able to move more people around and develop more of an agricultural stability for Russia, which we're going to get more into in a minute because I do want to talk about the serfs and Catherine. She also established a banking system and paper money. Found that very, very interesting. Just want to put it out there that just because she did that doesn't mean that she's necessarily bad, but I do find that suspiciously interesting. She completely changed the educational system of Russia, especially for women. She did allow noble women to achieve a higher education. She herself was a lover of knowledge, so it makes sense that she would try to do that for other noble women. But a lot of her other educational reforms, they do look very similar to the educational reforms that were put forth by the Federal Reserve in the early 20th century that basically dumped us down and made us all walking idiots. So that to me was also kind of suspicious, but nonetheless, yay for the women getting educated, right? In 1764, she also set up orphanages in Russia. On paper, that sounds really, really good, but I'm also very suspicious of that. 400,000 children were placed into the orphanage because of her creation of the orphanages. And I will note that according to statistics, there was a higher infant rate in the orphanages than anywhere else. Now, I don't know if that's because they didn't have their moms and it was just a harsh place to live, or if there's something more nefarious with that. I don't know. I don't know if we can really know, but I just thought that was interesting. Within her educational reforms, she also removed playtime, which we call recess today, which is really bad. Like kids need playtime. They need recess. And she also made it so the classrooms were super cold so that kids would be forced to focus. She, however, did not believe that peasants deserved an education. She did not like peasants, you guys. Again, we're going to get to the serf issue in a moment, but she thought that if you educated peasants, then they would be harder to control. She was also a lover of arts. She created a whole museum at the Kremlin, which is still open to this day. And she also, interestingly enough, was Voltaire's pen pal for about 15 years. He referred to her as the North Star, even though they never met in person. When he passed away, it is said that she was greatly and deeply affected by his death. Catherine also nationalized the churches. This meant that she, the state, could take money from the churches, which reminds me a lot of our 501c3 process today, that even though you think, oh, it's a nonprofit, it absolutely is part of the government. All your churches are part of the government. They're a 501c3. That is part of the government, my friends. So, and in 1773, all across Western Europe, the Jesuits were in trouble. Now, if you've been on this channel for a long time, you know that I don't like the Jesuits. The Jesuits are nothing but trouble. They are nothing but evil, 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 evil organization that's out there to traumatize and hurt people. And I think at this point in Western Europe, a lot of people were starting to figure this out. And so they were trying to abolish the Jesuits. Well, she made Russia an asylum for Jesuits. Because that's what every good Satanist needs, is an asylum. Now let's talk about the serfs. So what are serfs? And so I want to say this, and I hope I don't get zapped on YouTube for saying this, but there's this narrative out today that if you're a white person, you've historically never been through anything. That only minorities have been slaves. That is not true. And if you are have any type of education whatsoever, you know that's not true. I mean, the first slaves in the United States were Irish kids. Well, this also proves to the people who believe that just because you're white doesn't mean you have privilege, and it doesn't mean you come from privilege, because we're going to talk about serfs, y'all. These white people who were slaves. At this point, Russia was one of the last countries to use serfdom. This was a dying style of cheap or free labor. And this cheap labor is what made people rich. This was a social caste system in Russia, a pyramid scheme. Serfs were bound to the land they worked. The land was owned by nobles. If the serfs had children, their children would work the same land. Only nobles could have serfs. Serfs could eventually buy their freedom, but it's important to note that a serf's life was owned by the state. Serf owners could also trade serfs if they wanted to. Sounds very much like slavery. And it's important to also note that Catherine herself owned 500,000 serfs. And more importantly, 2.8 billion serfs were owned by the state. Now, in this growing age of enlightenment, age of reason, age of revolution, the idea of serfdom needing to potentially be abolished was an idea that had been talked about for a while. I mean, we think about the American Revolution, for example, happened in 1776. We, from 1860 to 1865, fought a war to free our slaves here. So that's not, historically speaking, that's very close together, right? And we look at when America only had slavery for like 70 years, because before 1776, we were not our own country. We were governed by Great Britain. So our slavery was actually their slavery. So we as a country only had it. We have, out of all the countries on the planet, the United States of America had slavery for the least amount of time. But by 1776, even in America, there were people who were trying to abolish slavery. So when we look at the serfs over in Russia, this idea of these abolitionists, of people getting rid of this idea that you own a human being, and the human being is owned by you and can't go anywhere unless you grant its ability. It's something that people are talking about, right? We're starting to go, wait, owning people isn't right. It's not right. Well, Catherine's in a tough situation with this, because part of her scheming to get the power that she has is to promise serfs to people. If you support me, I'll give you your own serfs. So she's kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place. She can't get rid of serfs because that's how she's gotten her power, is by promising bartering chips with these nobles. So what she does is she basically just reforms the serf's way of life. If a serf's master isn't treating the serf right, then the serf now has the right to lodge a complaint against the master. Which does make them more human than they were before, but it still is kind of a crappy thing to do to a human, not to grant them freedom. Well, again, there's rising unrest across Russia, across the world, when it comes to this idea of owning other human beings. We're also dealing with some problems with land, so people are hungry. And so what happens next? Again, it kind of snowballs into this huge issue with the serfs and the nobility. And this was Pugachev's revolution, or the Peasants' War, that lasted from 1773 to 1775. Pugachev was a disaffected ex-lieutenant of the Russian army. He assumed leadership of an alternative government in the name of Peter III. Now, he didn't just claim that this army was in the name of Peter III, he actually claimed to be Peter III. We'll talk more about this on Aquarius Rising Africa because I find that fascinating. Now, this is still considered the largest peasants' revolt in all of Russian history. Think about that, you guys. I mean, we had the Bolshevik Revolution, but this was bigger. This was a huge problem that Catherine had on her hands. Pugachev was arrested and thrown into a cage where he was paraded around the town. Then he was publicly executed on the 10th of January, 1775. He was beheaded, drawn, and quartered. Now, Catherine very famously struggled with her relationship with her son, Paul. Her son, Paul, detested her almost as much as she detested Paul's father, Peter. Now, remember, Catherine did not spend a lot of time with Paul when Paul was a baby because Empress Elizabeth had taken Paul from her. Now, when Paul had his child, his first son, Alexander, Catherine did to Paul what Elizabeth had done to Catherine, where she kind of took Alexander from Paul and raised him herself. She ended up loving Alexander so much that she was actually planning on giving the throne to Alexander and skipping Paul when she passed away. This wasn't just an urban legend, my friends. Like, she was planning a whole ceremony to do this, but she died before that could happen. The morning of November 6th, 1796 started off like any other morning. Catherine got up, got her coffee, but by 9 o'clock in the morning, Catherine was found face down on the floor. The doctor said that she, like her predecessor, Empress Elizabeth, had had a stroke. She was given her last rites at 9:45 p.m. the following day. She was 67 years old when she passed away, and she today is buried at the Cathedral of St. Peter and St. Paul Fortress in St. Petersburg. Now, upon her death, a rumor was started that Catherine's need for intimacy was so insatiable that she ended up trying to be intimate with a horse. And the harness holding the horse broke. The horse fell on top of her, and that is what crushed her. We know that that is not true. I'm not saying that there aren't people in power who don't practice bestiality, but we know that's not how she died. However, what's interesting to know, my friends, is that that rumor was actually started by her son, Paul. Paul started rumors that Catherine was a nymphomaniac, that she was this tarnished, horrible woman who killed his father so that she could take on as many lovers as she can, some human, some animal. But the truth of the matter is that Catherine actually only had about 10 to maybe 15 lovers in her life. And for the women watching right now, I want you to think about it and just count in your head how many lovers you've had. I don't know if Catherine craved intimacy more than the next person. I know it was weird for the people that she never remarried, but I think we can guess why she never remarried. Look at the luck she had in her first marriage. Plus, she's a woman at this time. It's the same reason why Queen Elizabeth I of England never married. To marry was to hand over power to a man. And if you're the empress, if you're the czariest of czars, and you've gone through everything in your life to get to the point, you're not just going to marry a man to then hand it over. However, there is a side to Catherine's personality. Sorry, my dog's barking. We'll just keep going. There is a side to Catherine's personality that I find very intriguing. And I don't know why she did this. Because I don't actually, again, believe that she was an nymphomaniac. I think she was just a normal woman. And I think because she was a woman alone in power, and because her son hated her so much, that there were unjust rumors spread. I'm not saying she was a good person. I don't think she was that great of a person, but I think some of these rumors are unjust. However, Catherine had a collection of erotic furniture. What? Who does that? Like, I just, was she trying to play into this rumor? Was she doing this as kind of an FU to the world? Because I don't think she was actually any more nymphomaniac than the next person. I think she put her country first all the time. And this is what's fascinating to me, because without this collection of furniture, we could really just say Paul was, didn't like his mom. But this collection of furniture is weird. What is this, you guys? What is this furniture? Oh my God, this is, I don't know. I'm just like mortified by these pieces of furniture. I mean, even the Nazis wrote about, y'all, when the Nazis invaded Russia and they found this stuff, they even wrote about it. This was even too much for the Nazis. So that's that, you guys. That's the biggest rumors we have about Catherine, is that she was a nymphomaniac and that she was killed trying to have sex with a horse, which we know isn't true. But that she also had, we know for a fact it is true, that she had a collection of erotic furniture. All right, y'all. I know this was a long episode, but we are going to be over on Aquarius Rising Africa at 9 a.m. Eastern Time. That's why I air these so early on Monday, so you can kind of hear the information before talking about it on Aquarius Rising Africa. Once again, that's a live show. So please join us so you can participate, give you some time to kind of do your own research. You can look up some stuff about this freaking furniture if you want, and we can continue the conversation over there with Shanti. A lot of these things I hit on, I didn't go into much detail about in this show. I do want to go into detail on with Shanti, because Shanti's kind of one of the experts when it comes to occult rituals and these interesting little pieces of information that come up in this research. So make sure you join us at 9 o'clock. A link to Aquarius Rising Africa will be down in the description box below, as well as our previous episodes over the Romanov. And next week we will pick up with Paul, her son, because he is fascinating, my friends. Absolutely fascinating. I hope you guys are having a wonderful day, and I will talk to you guys soon. Bye, everybody.